Otis Greene had faced gunfire overseas, but nothing prepared him for a smiling nurse and a locked glass door. Quick one, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. And if you're here for dignity, fairness, and real accountability, hit like and subscribe. Now listen. It was a bright Tuesday morning in a small American town where the streets looked clean. The flags outside the courthouse stood tall, and everyone said hello like they meant it. The kind of town where people believed the best of institutions because believing the worst felt exhausting. Otis was 72, broad-shouldered even with age, a quiet black veteran with silver in his beard and a way of carrying himself that said he had learned patience the hard way. He wore an old olive jacket that still held the shape of his past, and in his left hand he carried a small paper gift bag. Inside the bag were 3 things, simple things. A pack of strawberry hard sweets, the kind his wife used to keep in her handbag, a fresh pair of fuzzy socks with little blue flowers on them, and a card he had written in thick pen so she could read it easily. He had written, "I'm here, Glow. Same as always." His wife's name was Gloria Greene. 70, warm-hearted, sharp as a tack when she felt like herself. The sort of woman who remembered birthdays, noticed haircuts, and could tell, just by the sound of your steps, whether you were upset. A few months earlier, after a fall and a brief hospital stay, the doctor had recommended rehabilitation. Short-term, they'd said, just until she got her strength back. Otis had agreed because he loved her more than his own pride. He had signed the papers with a steady hand and told himself, it's only for a little while. And at first, it was fine. The place was called Cedar Grove. It wasn't one of those grim buildings people imagined when they heard nursing home. Cedar Grove was painted soft cream with bright windows. The lobby smelled of lemon polish and warm coffee. There were framed photos of smiling residents playing bingo, holding puppies, planting flowers. It looked like safety. Otis walked in, nodded to the receptionist, and held up his visitor badge from last week. "Morning," he said, voice calm. The receptionist, a young woman with tired eyes, glanced at her screen and offered a polite smile that did not reach her face. "Good morning, Mr. Greene. One moment." Otis already knew what was coming, the way you know the taste of something before it touches your tongue. He waited. Footsteps approached, soft and confident. A woman appeared from the corridor in blue scrubs, hair neat, posture perfect, a clipboard held like a badge of authority. Her name tag said, M. Caldwell, R.N., Marion Caldwell. Most families called her an angel. The Blue Angel, they joked, because she ran the floor like a ship's captain, but always smiled while doing it. Marion's smile arrived first, warm and professional. "Mr. Greene," she said, like she was greeting a friend. "It's lovely to see you." Otis returned a small nod. "I'm here to see my wife." Marion tilted her head with sympathetic concern, the kind that made you feel childish for asking. "Today isn't a good day," she said gently. "Gloria is overstimulated. We're keeping her environment calm." Overstimulated. That word again. Otis looked past Marion into the corridor. Through the glass doors, he could see the day room, bright with sunlight. He could see a television mounted high, volume low, a few residents sitting in chairs. And then he saw her. Gloria. She was sitting by the window, hands folded, staring out as if the world were a picture she wasn't allowed to touch. And then, like a flower turning toward the sun, Gloria's head moved. She looked up. She saw Otis. Her face changed in an instant. Light returned to it. A real smile, small but unmistakable. Her lips formed one word. Otis. Marion's body shifted, not aggressively, just strategically. She stepped sideways to block the line of sight. "She's confused," Marion said softly, like she was saving Otis from disappointment. It can be upsetting when she sees visitors unexpectedly. Otis held his gaze on Marion's face, searching for something human underneath the smooth professionalism. "Marion," he said, "my wife just smiled at me." Marion's smile did not crack. And we love that for her. We do. But right now we need to follow protocol. Otis didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. That was not his way. He simply asked, "What protocol is that?" Marion glanced down at the clipboard as if the answer lived there. "It's part of our cognitive wellness approach," she said. "We limit stimulation when residents are vulnerable." Otis breathed in slowly. "Yesterday you told me it was infection control," he said. Marion's eyes flickered, a tiny movement, quick enough that most people would miss it. "Those are related," she said, still gentle. "You know how it is. Policies evolve." Otis looked at the receptionist, who stared at her keyboard like it held the meaning of life. He looked back at Marion. "So I can't see her." Marion placed her hand lightly over her heart, the universal gesture for "I'm sorry," without actually being sorry. "Not today," she said. Otis glanced at the gift bag in his hand. "Can you give her these?" he asked. Marion smiled wider. "Of course, that's very kind." Otis held the bag back for a moment, not letting go. "Please make sure she gets the card," he said. Marion's voice stayed smooth. "Absolutely." Otis released the bag. Marion took it like she was doing him a favor. Otis turned and walked out of Cedar Grove, step by measured step until he reached the parking lot. Only then did he stop. Only then did his face change, not to anger, not yet, to something quieter and more dangerous, understanding. Because when Gloria smiled, she looked alive. And when Marion blocked the view, she looked pleased. Otis sat in his truck for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioning. In the rearview mirror, he caught his own eyes. He'd spent most of his life believing that if you stayed calm, stayed respectful, stayed patient, the world would eventually meet you halfway. But this felt different. This felt like being managed, like being handled, like being moved out of the way. And the worst part was how polite it was. Otis went home, made himself a cup of tea, and tried to push it aside. But that night, his phone buzzed with a text from Gloria's roommate's daughter, a woman Otis had met only twice. It read, "Mr. Greene, they told me not to come today either. Something's off." Otis stared at that message for a long time. Then he opened his notes app and typed one line. Tuesday. Denied. Overstimulated. The next morning, he went back. This time he arrived earlier, thinking perhaps he'd catch them before the day got busy. The lobby was quiet. The lemon polish smell was stronger than usual. The receptionist looked up, saw him, and her smile hesitated. "Morning," Otis said. "One moment," she replied immediately. Otis waited. Footsteps approached. Marion Caldwell again. "Mr. Greene," she said warmly, "you're very consistent." "I'm a husband," Otis replied. "That's what I do." Marion's smile tightened. "I'm afraid the timing today is also not ideal," she said. "Gloria is in therapy." "What time?" Otis asked. "Now," Marion said. Otis held up his visitor badge and looked at it, as if the plastic might answer. "This badge is from last week," he said. "Last week you told me I could come between 10 and 2. Marion nodded. "Correct." "It's 10:15, Otis said. Marion's voice remained calm. "Therapy can happen at any time." Otis paused. "Can I see the schedule?" he asked. Marion's eyes stayed on his, polite but firm. "We don't provide schedules to visitors," she said. "It can create confusion." Otis looked past Marion again. This time he couldn't see Gloria. The corridor angle didn't allow it. He saw something else, though. 2 other families standing near the wall, older people, a white couple in their late 60s, and a Latina woman holding a small bouquet. They were speaking quietly to a staff member. Their shoulders were slumped with familiar disappointment. Otis walked closer, still calm. "Y'all being turned away too?" he asked gently. The Latina woman nodded, eyes wet. "They said my mom is resting, but she rests every day." The older white man shrugged with a forced smile. "They said they're short-staffed. It happens." Otis heard Marion behind him, voice still sweet. "Families, Please understand we are doing what's best for your loved ones, she said. We need cooperation. Cooperation? Otis turned back to Marion. I'll come back later, he said. Marion smiled as if she had won a small game. Thank you for understanding, she replied. Otis walked out again, but this time, as he reached the door, he stopped and turned around. He looked up at the sign posted on the wall beside the reception desk. Visiting hours, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Otis pulled out his phone and took a photo. Nothing dramatic, just a photo. Then he walked outside. In his truck, he opened his notes again. Wednesday, denied, therapy, visiting hours posted 10 to 2, photo taken 10:18. Otis wasn't trying to start trouble. He was trying to understand. That afternoon, he drove to the local diner and sat in a booth by the window, the kind of booth where older folks lingered over coffee and talked about weather and grandkids. He ordered a slice of pie he didn't really want. He stared at the plate while his mind ran through the same loop. Why would a place that looked so clean, so bright, so friendly, keep families out? Unless quiet made things easier. Unless isolation made people compliant. Unless, without family watching, the staff could write any story they liked. Otis remembered something his sergeant had told him years ago. Pay attention to what doesn't need to be hidden. Otis went back the next day, Thursday, but this time he didn't arrive like a man asking permission. He arrived like a man who belonged. He walked in, nodded, and held up his visitor badge. The receptionist looked at him like she was hoping he'd disappear. Morning, Otis said again. One moment, she said again. Marion arrived again. Mr. Greene, she said again, and the same sentence began to form on her lips. Otis spoke first, gently, but with a new firmness. Before you tell me no, he said, I'd like you to show me the policy, in writing, with today's date. Marion blinked once. We don't need to do that, she replied, still calm. This is standard care. Otis nodded. So it exists, he said, in writing. Marion gave a small laugh, like he was charming. Mr. Greene, you're upset, she said, and that's understandable, but paperwork won't change the fact that Gloria's needs come first. Otis kept his voice steady. My wife's needs include seeing her husband, he said. Marion's smile held, but the warmth in it cooled. Let's not make this adversarial, she said. Adversarial. Otis looked at her for a long second. Then don't block me, he said quietly. Marion's eyes sharpened, not angry, not yet, just alert. I'm going to ask you to leave, she said. Otis exhaled slowly. All right, he said, but before I do, I'd like to know your full name, please. Marion's smile returned like a mask. Marion Caldwell, she said, head nurse. Otis nodded and repeated it softly, as if locking it into memory. Marion Caldwell, he said. Then he left. No shouting, no scene. But as he walked out, he noticed something else. A woman in blue scrubs, younger, maybe late 20s, standing near the corridor entrance. She wasn't smiling. She looked nervous, eyes flicking between Marion and Otis like she wanted to say something but couldn't. When their eyes met, she looked away quickly. Otis filed that away too. That night, Otis got a call. It was from an unknown number. He answered. A soft voice spoke. Mr. Greene? Yes, Otis said. This is Nina, the voice said. I work at Cedar Grove. Otis sat up straighter. I'm not supposed to call, Nina whispered, but I saw what happened. Otis kept his voice low. You all right? Nina exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. I'm okay, she said. I don't like how they're doing this. Families are being labeled disruptive for asking normal questions. Otis listened without interrupting. Nina continued. They do it more when inspections are coming. They keep the halls quiet. They keep visitors out. And they say it's for resident wellness. Otis's jaw tightened. Do they do it to everyone? He asked. Nina hesitated. No, she admitted. Not everyone. Otis stared at the wall. Who do they do it to? He asked gently. Nina's silence answered first. Then she said quietly, the ones who notice things, the ones who don't just nod. Otis swallowed. What about my wife? He asked. Nina's voice softened. Your wife perks up when you come. I've seen it. Otis closed his eyes. So why block me? He asked. Nina whispered, because when she perks up, she asks questions later. And when she asks questions, Marion gets annoyed. Otis opened his eyes again. He spoke slowly, choosing each word. Nina, he said, I'm not trying to get you in trouble. I know, Nina replied quickly. I couldn't sleep. Otis nodded once, though she couldn't see it. Thank you for calling, he said. If you ever feel safe enough to write down what you see, just dates and times, that would help. Nina's breath caught. I'll try, she whispered. Then she hung up. Otis sat still for a long moment, phone in his hand. He wasn't imagining it. He wasn't being dramatic. It was real. And now he had a witness, even if she was scared. The next day, Friday, Otis went back to Cedar Grove, but he didn't go alone. He called his pastor first. Reverend Miles was 65 with a calm voice that made people straighten up. He had buried half the town and married the other half. People respected him, even when they didn't agree with him. Reverend Miles met Otis in the parking lot. You said it's not right, Reverend Miles said. That's enough for me. They walked in together. Marion's smile faltered for the first time when she saw Reverend Miles. Oh, she said, quickly recovering. Hello, Reverend. Reverend Miles smiled pleasantly. Morning, Ms. Caldwell. Otis held up his visitor badge. I'm here to see my wife, Otis said. Marion's voice stayed polite. Mr. Greene, we discussed this. Reverend Miles leaned in slightly, still calm. I'd like to see the written policy that prevents a husband from visiting his wife during posted hours, Reverend Miles said. Marion blinked again. This is a care decision, she said, not a policy issue. Reverend Miles nodded slowly. Then it should be documented as a care decision, he said, with a clinical reason, in writing, with today's date. Marion glanced at the receptionist, then back to them. You're putting pressure on staff, Marion said, tone still soft but now edged. That's not appropriate. Otis spoke quietly. We are asking for clarity. Marion's jaw tightened. I'm going to speak with the administrator, she said. Please wait. She walked away, heels quiet on the polished floor. The receptionist didn't look up. Otis and Reverend Miles stood by the wall. After a few minutes, a man in a suit appeared. Late 50s, balding, name tag that read, Administrator David Holt. He offered a professional smile. Mr. Greene, he said. What seems to be the problem? Otis explained calmly. No exaggeration, just facts. Denied multiple days, reasons shifting, no written policy. Wife visibly responsive. David Holt nodded as if he was listening, but his eyes kept flicking toward Marion, like he was checking what he was allowed to say. We take resident wellness seriously, Holt said. Sometimes family visits can be distressing. Reverend Miles kept his voice level. You have a sign that says 10 to 2, he said. If you're denying visits during those hours, the sign is misleading. Holt's smile tightened. We can adjust signage, he said quickly, like that solved it. Otis looked at him. You can adjust the sign, Otis said, or you can adjust the behavior. Holt's nostrils flared slightly. I'm going to request that you schedule visits ahead, Holt said. That will prevent misunderstanding. Otis nodded. Fine, he said. Book me right now. Holt hesitated. Marion's eyes sharpened again. The receptionist cleared her throat, anxious. Holt said, We can do that. Otis watched as the receptionist typed something, then slid a printed slip across the desk. Saturday at 11, she said softly. Otis took the slip, looked at it, then folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. Thank you, he said. As Otis turned to leave, Marion's voice followed him, still polite. We appreciate your cooperation, she said. Otis didn't look back. Outside, Reverend Miles exhaled. That slip, Reverend Miles said, is a receipt. Otis nodded. That's what I'm collecting, he replied. Saturday came. Otis woke early, ironed his shirt and put on a clean cap with a small veteran patch. He didn't wear it to intimidate. He wore it because it reminded him who he was when he felt himself being treated like he was nothing. He drove to Cedar Grove, arrived at 10:50 and walked in holding the printed slip like a boarding pass. The receptionist looked up and immediately looked away. Otis's stomach tightened. Marion appeared within seconds, as if summoned. "Mr. Greene," Marion said, smile practiced. "We weren't expecting you." Otis held up the slip. "You booked me," he said. Marion glanced at it, then frowned lightly, like the paper had offended her. "Oh," she said. "I'm so sorry. There's been a change. Gloria had a difficult morning. We can't do a visit right now." Otis stared at her. His voice stayed calm, but something deeper was now present in it. "You printed this yesterday," he said, "and you're telling me today it doesn't matter." Marion's smile tightened. "Things change in care," she said. Otis looked past her toward the corridor. "Can I at least see her from the day room door?" he asked. "Just wave." Marion shook her head gently, like she was dealing with a stubborn child. "No," she said. That could upset her. Otis clenched his jaw. He looked at the receptionist. "Can you print me a policy?" Otis said. "The one that allows you to cancel scheduled visits without notice." The receptionist's hands trembled slightly. Marion's tone cooled. "Mr. Greene," she said, "if you continue to behave this way, we will have to note it in your file." Otis looked at her. "My file," he repeated quietly. Marion smiled again. "Yes," she said, "for resident safety." Otis took a slow breath. He pulled out his phone and opened his camera. He didn't film Marion's face. He filmed the printed slip in his hand. He filmed the clock on the wall behind the desk. He filmed the visiting hours sign. Then he lowered the phone. Marion's smile stayed in place, but her eyes hardened. "You can't record in here," she said. Otis looked at her, calm as ice. "I'm not recording residents," he said. "I'm recording my receipts." Marion stepped closer, voice low. "This is a care facility," she said, "not a courtroom." Otis met her gaze. "That's the problem," he replied. He walked out. In his truck, his hands shook for the first time. Not fear, grief. Because every time they blocked him, they weren't just blocking a visit. They were stealing minutes. And when you're old enough, minutes are precious. Otis sat there until his breathing steadied. Then he typed in his notes. Saturday. Scheduled visit canceled. No notice. Threatened with being noted in my file. Recorded sign, clock, slip. That afternoon, his phone rang again. It was Nina. "I heard," Nina whispered. Otis's voice was gentle. "You okay?" Nina sounded close to tears. "They're saying you're hostile," she said. "Marion told staff you're making residents anxious." Otis shut his eyes. "I didn't even raise my voice," he said. "I know," Nina said quickly. "But it doesn't matter what you do. It matters what they write." That sentence landed like a stone. It matters what they write. Otis opened his eyes. "Nina," he said, "I need one thing from you if you can." Nina hesitated. "What?" "I need the official visiting policy," Otis said. "Just a photo, if you can do it safely." Nina's breath caught. "I'll try," she whispered. Otis's voice softened. "Don't risk yourself," he said, "only if it's safe." "I will," Nina said, and she hung up. Otis didn't sleep well that night. He lay awake imagining Gloria in that day room, looking toward the hallway, waiting for him like she always did. He remembered their first apartment, small and noisy, where Gloria used to sit by the window waiting for him to come home from work. He remembered how she'd wave as soon as she saw him, like he was a miracle, even when he was just a tired man carrying groceries. Now she was waiting again, and he was being kept away by a woman in blue scrubs who smiled like she was doing God's work. On Sunday morning, Otis went to church. He didn't go to show face. He went because he needed strength. After the service, Reverend Miles introduced Otis to a woman named Casey Trent. Casey was in her early 50s, confident, practical, with a sharp mind and kind eyes. She worked with the state long-term care ombudsman program. Not a politician, not a loud activist, someone who understood systems. Reverend Miles said, "Otis needs help." Casey listened as Otis explained. Again, just facts, dates, times, reasons given, scheduled visit canceled. When Otis finished, Casey asked one question. "Do you have proof of the changing reasons?" she said. Otis pulled out his phone and showed her the photos. Visiting hours sign, printed slip, timestamps, notes. Casey nodded slowly. "Good," she said. "You're not just upset, you're organized." Otis looked at her. "What do I do?" he asked. Casey's voice was calm. "We do this properly," she said. "First, we request the policy in writing. If they refuse, that's a problem. Second, we request the visitor log entries. Third, we ask why you are being flagged, and we do it with witnesses." Otis exhaled. "I can do that," he said. Casey nodded. "And one more thing," she added. "Don't go alone anymore." Otis swallowed. That week, Otis returned to Cedar Grove on Monday, not alone. Casey came with him. Reverend Miles came too. They walked in like a calm storm. The receptionist looked up, saw the group, and her smile froze. Marion Caldwell appeared within seconds. "Mr. Greene," Marion said brightly, as if she hadn't canceled his visit 2 days earlier. "What a surprise." Casey stepped forward. "Hello," Casey said. "I'm Casey Trent. I'm with the Ombudsman program. I'm here to support Mr. Greene and to clarify your visitation policy." Marion's smile twitched. "Oh," Marion said, "we're fully compliant." Casey nodded politely. "Then it'll be simple," Casey said. "Please provide the written policy you are using to deny and cancel visits during posted hours." Marion blinked, then glanced toward the corridor. "Our administrator handles policy distribution," she said smoothly. Casey smiled, patient. "Great," she said. "Let's speak with him." Marion's voice stayed light. "He's busy." Casey's tone didn't change, but it sharpened slightly. "So am I," Casey said, "and I'm here now." A few minutes later, David Holt appeared again, suit crisp, smile professional. "Ms. Trent," he said, extending his hand, "we appreciate oversight." Casey shook his hand once, firm. "Mr. Holt," she said, "Mr. Greene has been repeatedly denied access to his wife during posted hours. The reasons given have changed each time. He has a canceled scheduled visit with documentation. We need the written policy and the documentation supporting the care decision." Holt's smile tightened. "We act in the best interest of residents," he said. Casey nodded. "Then show me," she replied. A pause. A long pause. Marion stood very still behind him, her smile fixed. Holt cleared his throat. "We can print our visitor guidelines," he said. Casey nodded. "Print them," she said, "with today's date." Holt looked to the receptionist. The receptionist stood, walked to a printer, and returned with a sheet of paper. Casey read it. Visitor guidelines. Nothing about denying a spouse during hours. Nothing about canceling scheduled visits without notice. Casey looked up. "This does not justify what's happening," she said calmly. Holt's cheeks flushed slightly. "Mr. Greene can schedule visits," Holt said. "We've offered that." Otis spoke quietly. "You scheduled me," he said. "Then you canceled me." Holt's eyes flicked to Marion, then back. "We can review that," Holt said. Casey nodded. "Review it now," she said. "Print me the scheduling entry and the cancellation record." Holt's smile wavered. "I'm not sure we can access that easily," he said. Casey's eyes stayed steady. "You can access it," she said, "or you can tell me you can't. Either answer means something." The receptionist's hands shook again. Holt looked at Marion. Marion's smile remained. Holt sighed and nodded toward the receptionist. The receptionist typed, printed, and brought a page. Casey read it quickly. Then she pointed. "Here," she said. "Canceled by staff. Reason listed as family disruptive. What behavior was disruptive?" Holt hesitated. Marion stepped forward. "Mr. Greene was recording," Marion said, voice sweet. "That can unsettle residents." Otis's voice stayed low. "I recorded the sign and the slip," he said, "not residents." Casey looked at Marion. "Do you have a policy against recording signage and personal documentation?" Casey asked. Marion smiled. "We discourage recording," she said. Casey nodded. Discourage is not policy, she replied. And family disruptive is a serious label. It can impact the resident's care and the family's access. You need evidence. Marion's smile thinned. Mr. Greene is emotional, Marion said, like she was being compassionate. It's understandable, but we have to protect Gloria's well-being. Otis's chest tightened at hearing Gloria described like a case file. Reverend Miles spoke, calm but firm. Gloria's well-being includes seeing her husband, he said. You don't protect someone by isolating them. Marion's eyes flashed for a split second, then she smiled again. We can allow a brief visit, Marion said. 10 minutes, if Mr. Greene remains calm. Otis stared at her. He had been calm the whole time. Casey stepped slightly in front of Otis, not aggressive, just protective. We'll accept a visit, Casey said, and I will accompany him. Holt nodded quickly, eager to end the tension. Fine, he said. 10 minutes. Marion turned toward the corridor. Follow me, she said. As they walked, Otis's heart pounded. He hated that it felt like begging. He hated that it took a witness for him to access his own wife. They reached the day room. Gloria sat near the window again. When she saw Otis, her face lit up in a way that made the whole room feel warmer. Otis, she said, clear as day. Marion stiffened slightly. Gloria reached out her hand. Otis took it carefully, like it was something sacred. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, I'm here, Glo. Same as always. Gloria's eyes watered. They said you were busy, she whispered. Otis froze. Casey's eyes sharpened. Otis kept his face soft for Gloria. I'm never too busy for you, he said gently. Gloria squeezed his hand. I thought you forgot, she whispered. Otis swallowed hard. I could never, he said. Behind him, Marion stood with her clipboard watching. Not like a caregiver watching a patient, like a guard watching a prisoner. Otis sat with Gloria, speaking softly, asking about her day, telling her about the church service, telling her about the birds on the porch. Gloria's shoulders relaxed, her face softened. The room felt different around her, as if her calm came not from isolation, but from connection. At the 9-minute mark, Marion stepped forward. Time, she said gently. Otis looked up slowly. Casey held up a hand. Actually, Casey said, we're going to extend this. Marion smiled tightly. We agreed 10 minutes, she said. Casey's voice stayed calm. And now we're clarifying something, she replied. Gloria just said staff told her Otis was busy. That's a deception. That is not a care intervention. That is manipulation. Holt, who had followed them, shifted uncomfortably. Marion's smile did not crack. We never said that, Marion said. Gloria looked up, confused. They told me, Gloria said softly. They said, your husband's busy, honey, like I was silly. Otis felt heat rise in his chest, but he held it down for Gloria's sake. Casey looked at Holt. Who told her? Casey asked. Holt swallowed. Marion replied smoothly, residents misunderstand, she said. They can be confused. Casey leaned closer, voice still gentle but now edged like a blade. Then why does she become clear when her husband is here? Casey asked. Why did she say his name immediately? Why did she smile immediately? That's not overstimulation. That's love. Marion's eyes hardened. Holt cleared his throat. We'll review staff communication, Holt said quickly. Casey nodded. Good, she said, because we're not done. Casey turned to Otis. Mr. Greene, she said quietly, ask Gloria one question. Otis nodded. He looked at Gloria and softened his voice. Glo, he said, have they stopped other people from visiting too? Gloria's brow furrowed. They told Dee's son to stop coming, she whispered. Otis glanced around. Dee? He asked. Gloria nodded toward the far corner. A woman sat there, late 60s, hair wrapped, eyes sharp. She watched them with a look that said she'd seen this before. When Otis looked at her, she lifted her chin. Dee Jackson, she called out, voice clear. They keep folks out so folks don't ask questions? Marion's voice snapped, still polite but sharper. "Ms. Jackson, please," Marion said. Dee chuckled. "There she go," Dee said. "Blue Angel, smiling while she locks the door." A few residents turned their heads. Holt's face tightened. Marion's smile became a warning. Otis felt something shift, not just in him, in the room, because truth spoken out loud changes the air. Casey nodded as if she'd just received confirmation of a theory. "Thank you, Ms. Jackson," Casey said calmly. Then she turned to Holt. "I want your visitor logs," Casey said. "I want the last 30 days. I want the denial reasons. I want the complaint log. And I want a list of families flagged as disruptive." Holt swallowed hard. "That's a lot of information," he said. Casey's eyes stayed steady. "It's necessary," she replied. Marion stepped forward. "This is becoming disruptive," Marion said softly, irony thick. Casey looked at Marion. "No," Casey said. "This is becoming accountable." Otis squeezed Gloria's hand gently. "I'll be back," he whispered to her. Gloria's eyes widened. "Promise?" she asked. Otis smiled, soft and certain. "I promise," he said. As Otis left the day room with Casey and Reverend Miles, he saw Nina in the corridor pushing a cart. Nina's eyes met his, and for a second, the fear in her face changed into something else. Hope. That afternoon, Casey filed a formal request and scheduled an unannounced visit for later in the week. Otis went home and sat at his kitchen table, staring at the photos on his phone. He realized something that made his stomach turn. Marion had power, not because she was physically stopping him. She had power because she was writing the story. And if you let someone else write your story, they can erase you with a pen. Otis decided he would not be erased. Over the next 2 days, Otis did something simple and powerful. He became consistent, not just in visiting, in documenting. He arrived at Cedar Grove at different times within posted hours. He took a photo of the visiting sign every time. He wrote down who met him, what reason they gave, and whether that reason matched last time. If he was allowed a brief wave, he noted it. If he was denied, he noted it. He did it quietly. No shouting, no scene. Just receipts. On Wednesday, he arrived at 11. Denied. Gloria is napping. On Thursday, he arrived at 12. Denied. Gloria is in group therapy. On Friday, he arrived at 1. Denied. We're short-staffed. 3 different reasons, all polite, all vague. And yet every time he looked through the glass corridor doors, he saw a resident sitting quietly in the day room, not distressed, not overstimulated, just present. And every time he asked to at least wave, Marion blocked the view. By Friday afternoon, Nina called again. "I got the policy," Nina whispered. Otis's heart raced. Nina sent a photo. Otis opened it. The policy showed visiting hours. It encouraged family involvement. It mentioned infection control protocols, but nothing about banning a spouse repeatedly. It said restrictions must be documented with clear justification. Otis stared at the sentence that mattered most. Restrictions must be documented. Otis forwarded the photo to Casey. Then he sat back and let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in him for weeks. Because now, he didn't just have feelings. He had facts. The following Monday, Casey arrived at Cedar Grove unannounced. Otis waited in his truck across the street, hands clenched, watching through the windshield. He wasn't hiding. He just wanted to see what happened when power walked in without warning. Inside, Casey asked for the logs again. Holt tried to delay. Marion tried to smile her way through it. But something about Casey was different. Casey didn't argue in circles. She asked one question, then waited. Silence can be pressure when you refuse to fill it. When Holt finally produced partial logs, Casey noticed gaps. Days missing. Entries vague. Family disruptive. Resident overstimulated. No detail, no incident report, no witness, no documentation. Casey requested the original logs. Holt claimed they were archived. Casey requested the archive location. Holt hesitated. Marion's eyes flicked toward a locked cabinet behind the admin desk. Casey saw it too. "Open it," Casey said calmly. Holt's smile strained. "That cabinet is for confidential records," he said. Casey nodded. "Exactly," she replied. "The records you're using to restrict family access are confidential, so open it." Holt looked at Marion. Marion's smile remained, but her face had gone rigid. Holt sighed and reached for a key. When the cabinet opened, Casey began pulling out folders. Otis couldn't hear any of it from his truck, but he watched body language through the glass. Casey's posture stiffened. Holt's shoulders slumped. Marion stepped forward quickly, as if to intervene. Casey held up a hand, firm. Marion's smile disappeared for half a second, then returned, but it returned weaker. A few minutes later, Casey walked out of Cedar Grove and called Otis. "Come in," she said simply. "Now." Otis's heart pounded as he stepped out of his truck, crossed the street, and walked through the lobby doors. Everything looked the same: the lemon polish, the coffee smell, the framed photos of smiling residents. But now Otis saw what he hadn't wanted to see before. The building wasn't the truth. The paperwork was. Casey met him near reception. "We found a pattern," Casey said quietly. "Marion has been flagging families as disruptive with no documentation. She's been restricting visits right before external reviews. She's also been instructing staff to tell residents families are busy to reduce agitation." Otis's chest tightened. "Why?" he asked. Casey's eyes were hard now. "Because quiet looks good," she said. "Quiet is easier to manage, and quiet reduces complaints." Otis looked down, jaw clenched. Casey continued. "We also found something else, a list." "What list?" Otis asked. Casey exhaled. "A list of residents whose families are high risk," she said, "meaning families who ask questions, families who notice changes, families who advocate." Otis stared at her. "My name is on it," he said, not as a question. Casey nodded once. "Yes," she said. Otis's hands clenched. He wanted to explode. But he thought of Gloria's face when she smiled. He thought of her saying, "I thought you forgot." He forced his voice to stay calm. "What happens now?" he asked. Casey looked toward the corridor. "Now," she said, "you see your wife, properly, and we observe." They walked together down the corridor. Marion stood near the nurse's station, clipboard in hand, smile fixed, but her eyes were tight. Holt stood beside her, sweating slightly. Casey spoke clearly. "Mr. Greene will have a normal visit," Casey said, "as per policy. If you restrict it, you will document the clinical reason in writing immediately, and we will review it." Marion's smile trembled. "Of course," Marion said softly. "We always follow policy." Casey nodded. "Good," she said. "Today is a good day to start." Otis entered the day room. Gloria sat near the window again, but this time, when she saw Otis, she didn't just smile. She stood. Slowly, carefully, but she stood. "Otis," she said, voice clear. He moved toward her quickly, but gently, arms open. Gloria stepped into him. Otis held her like he had held her for decades, not like she was fragile, like she was home. Gloria's voice broke. "They kept saying you were busy," she whispered into his chest. Otis closed his eyes. "I wasn't busy," he whispered back. They were lying. Gloria pulled back and looked up at him. Her eyes narrowed, that familiar Gloria look. "I knew it," she said. Otis almost laughed, even through the pain. "That's my girl," he whispered. They sat together, hands intertwined. Otis told Gloria the truth gently, not to burden her, but to ground her. "I've been coming," he said, "every day." Gloria's eyes filled. "You did?" she asked. Otis nodded. "Every day," he said. Gloria squeezed his hand hard. "I felt it," she whispered. "I felt you." Otis swallowed, voice low. "I'm here now," he said. Across the room, D. Jackson watched them with satisfaction. "About time," D. muttered loudly enough to be heard. A few residents chuckled. The air changed. It didn't feel like a quiet facility anymore. It felt like humans. After 20 minutes, Marion stepped toward them, smile strained. "Mr. Greene," she said softly, "we need to let Gloria rest." Casey stepped forward instantly. What clinical reason? Casey asked. Marion blinked. She's been engaged, Marion said. Casey's voice stayed even. Engaged is not distress, she replied. Gloria looks calm. She looks happy. Gloria turned her head and looked straight at Marion. I am happy, Gloria said clearly. He's my husband. Marion's smile tightened like it was held by threads. Holt shifted. Casey nodded slowly. Thank you, Gloria, Casey said gently. Marion's eyes flickered. Holt cleared his throat. Marion, he said quietly, why don't you step into my office? Marion's head turned slowly. Her smile remained, but it looked carved now. Of course, she said. As Marion walked away, Nina stood near the corridor watching. Nina's eyes were wet. Otis caught her gaze and gave her a small nod. Thank you. Nina pressed her lips together, trying not to cry. Over the next week, Cedar Grove changed. Not overnight, not magically, but noticeably. Visiting hours were posted clearly and repeatedly, not just on one sign, but on multiple boards. Families were no longer turned away with vague excuses. If a resident truly needed rest, staff explained it with clarity and offered alternatives, like a quiet visit in the room or a scheduled time that was actually honored. The day room became louder, in a good way. Grandchildren visited. People brought photo albums. Residents sat up straighter. They laughed more. You could feel it in the hallway, like a house that had been holding its breath finally exhaled. One afternoon, Otis arrived and found something that made his chest tighten, a handwritten note on the reception desk. We welcome families. Love is part of care. Otis stared at it. It wasn't fancy, just a note, but it felt like justice. Otis walked down the corridor and found Gloria in the day room again. This time she had her fuzzy socks on, the blue flower socks. And when she saw him, she smiled like she'd been smiling at him for 50 years. Look, she said proudly, lifting her feet slightly. Your socks. Otis laughed softly. They look good on you, he said. Gloria patted the chair beside her. Sit, she said. Tell me everything. Otis sat. He told her about the birds on the porch again. He told her about Reverend Miles's sermon. He told her about Dee, who had apparently been running unofficial bingo games when staff weren't watching. Gloria laughed, real laughter. Otis felt something in his chest loosen, not because the fight was over, but because the point had been proven. Gloria wasn't overstimulated by love. She was sustained by it. As Otis sat with Gloria, Dee rolled her chair closer. Mr. Greene, Dee said, voice proud, you did what we couldn't. Otis smiled gently. I just showed up, he said. Dee waved a hand. That's the thing, she replied. Most folks stop showing up when they keep shutting the door, but you kept coming. Otis looked at Gloria's face, calm and bright. I couldn't stop, he said quietly. That evening, Otis walked out of Cedar Grove with Gloria's hand in his memory and something else in his pocket, a folded paper Casey had given him. Casey had said, This is not for you to carry emotionally, but it's something you should know. Otis had waited until he was in his truck to unfold it. It was a document, one line highlighted. Facility transfer history, Caldwell, Marion, and underneath it, 3 states listed, 3 facilities, same role. Otis stared at the page, heart heavy but not defeated, because now he understood. Marion wasn't an accident, she was a pattern. His phone buzzed, a text from Casey. Your actions helped more families than you know. Otis looked up at the building. Bright windows, soft cream walls, a place that looked like safety again, because it was beginning to become it. He folded the paper and put it away. Then he whispered, not as a threat, but as a promise. Not on my watch. And for the first time in weeks, he drove home feeling lighter. Not because the world was perfect, but because one door had opened. And when doors open, people breathe. If you've ever had someone you love in a facility and you felt that helpless feeling, tell me in the comments. Have you ever been blocked from seeing your own family, then told it was policy. Because here's the truth. The devil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes she looks like a smile. Sometimes she wears a clipboard. Sometimes she speaks in soft tones and calls control care. Sometimes she wears blue. But this story was never about destroying someone. It was about restoring something: dignity, connection, truth. Because love is not a privilege you earn. It's a human right you protect. And if anybody tries to block that, politely or not, then it's time to stop being quiet and start being clear. Show up. Write it down. Collect your receipts. Bring a witness. And remember this: when you insist on dignity, you don't just save yourself. You make the path safer for the next family walking through that door. If this story moved you, hit like and subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in dignity, fairness, and real accountability. And if you want a part 2, because that transfer history looks like a whole trail, comment part 2 and tell me what you think Marion was really running across those states.